Hey, WTUFO fans. If you like the show and you want it to continue existing, head to patreon.com/WTUFO and support us for $1 a month. No special stuff, no gatekeeping. Just support the show for $1 a month to help it keep existing. Patreon.com/WTUFO. Thank you very much. What the UFO? I'm here with John and Gerry Tedesco. Hi, guys. Nice to meet you.
How you doing? Nice to be here.
Yep.
Really excited to talk with you guys. John and Gerry are instrumentation engineers with some aerospace and sensor experience they're going to tell us a little bit more about. They're also project research affiliates with the Galileo project and the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. And they've got some affiliation with the Society for UAP Studies as well. So you guys are across the board involved in the scientific study of UAP. And I'm hoping that you can tell us, just to start, a little bit about your history as technologists.
Okay, sure. I'll start. My name is John. Well, I've been in the industry for the electrical industry, electronics industry for quite a while. Right after I got out of high school back in I don't know if I should say it, 1980. But I'm an electrical engineer. I've been employed with Underwriters Laboratories. Recently retired due to some health issues, neurological issues that I had to deal with, with Lyme disease, long-term Lyme. But I have a master's in education, technical career type training, and I have a bachelor's of science in electrical engineering. And I've been with Underwriters Laboratories as an instrumentation engineer, worked in lab support, also worked on product safety for the longest time, and I'm sure everybody knows that. See that UL mark on the back of their product, that it's the mark for safety. And I've been doing this for a long time, but toward the last I'd say 5 to 10 years of my career, I've been more toward the instrumentation and developing instrumentation and procedures and so forth for laboratory personnel. So it's been a kind of a long journey with that. And I would say also before that, I was also involved in the repair industry. I was a television service, video service technician for quite a while. So I'm very familiar with cameras and that sort of thing, commercial consumer electronics. So it's been a long haul.
Okay, I'm Gerry Tedesco. My background's pretty diversified. I work in engineering. I've done that most of my life. I worked in the aerospace. Right now I work in the aerospace industry, but I've worked in the defense sector for at least 25 years. I worked on sensor systems. They're called RISDA, which means reconnaissance, surveillance, and target acquisition systems. I held a secret security clearance doing that in classified projects. Before that, I actually had I have a couple of college degrees. One in public health. I have other in forensics engineering. But I originally worked in forensic science for a couple of years. I actually worked for the Office of the Medical Examiner in New York. Worked in their laboratories. I have worked in Underwriters Laboratories for a couple of years, and a couple of other analytical laboratory environments, but most of my time was spent in the defense sector. And it directly relates to what we're doing now.
Exactly.
Yeah, fascinating rundown. I also heard somebody mention the IEEE with regard to you guys. Are you associated with the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers?
Yeah, both of us are associated. And I'm a longtime member. Well, Gerald is too, and I'm a senior member in the IEEE.
John was you were actually chairman.
Yeah, I had a chairman position for a while for Long Island.
We're also members of the American Academy of Environmental Engineers and Scientists.
Yeah. There's a few ABC acronyms in there.
There's a lot of letters now.
Yeah, there's at least 4 or 5 other agencies that we're involved in. All in the name of science, science and engineering.
And now you've got 3-letter agencies knocking on your door. So I hear.
Yeah.
We can get to that a little bit later. Sure. I also just wanted to ask on a personal level, are you, I think I heard you say you're 2 of 5 brothers. Is that right?
Yes.
Actually came from a large family of 9 kids altogether.
Yeah.
9 siblings.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Some adopted.
Okay, yeah.
Adopted, yeah.
That's amazing. Are you guys twins or are you just?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, my shadow over here.
Nice.
Don't beat me by 3 minutes.
I was just gonna ask because I have twin friends, and that's been a lifelong obsession for them. The 9-minute difference.
Yeah,
3 minutes. You're hot on his heels, Gerry.
Yeah, we're always accused of finishing each other's sentence. You know, and we try not to do that too often.
Well, now you're expanding the horizons of knowledge together, and it's very exciting, and we're all grateful for you doing that. So thank you so much. And maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about how you got into UAP.
Sure. I'll let you start.
Well, it started about a year or 2 years before the release of the OD&I report.
The 2021 report.
Yeah, June. Yeah, I think it was June of 2021, I guess.
Total bombshell report. I think listeners of this show will remember it. They basically say some of these things are physical, some of them look technological. You can't ascribe them to adversaries or secret U.S. programs. So it was the moment that an agency formally said a bunch of these things are real and question marks.
Absolutely, definitely big moment.
Yeah,
and at that period of time, Avi Loeb had stepped in. He was doing astronomy, but he was looking at interstellar objects. That was focused before that. When the OD&I report was released, Avi decided to start looking at UAPs. We were designing a prototyped mobile laboratory. It was a type of RV or an expeditionary vehicle, which we were doing a bottom-up design of it. And we wanted to use it to do environmental surveys, do electrosmog studies, determine exposure levels to wireless communications, that sort of thing. And we also had an interest in UAPs, because we realized that this could be also translated into storm studies, electrical phenomena like ball lightning, dark lightning, that kind of thing. And when the UAP report came out, we reached out to Avi Loeb and told him what we were doing. We were just finishing the design of this mobile laboratory, and we told him it certainly could be used to look at the UAP topic. So he took an interest in it. He was early starting out in the Galileo project, so they didn't quite have a plan in place, other than he was talking about using telescopes to take a careful look at the sky. So we had brought up the fact that we were going to use sensor systems and various types of sensor technologies.
Yeah, basically we had that equipped on the laboratory, the mobile lab,
right,
which was outfitted for quite a bit of the environmental research, but obviously could be used for sky as well. And these objects is if we're looking at something at the RF region, if we're looking at basically looking at the whole electromagnetic spectrum. We focused on the RF, but of course light and sound as well. And we had an instrumented platform that was already built and ready to go. There was been some refinements over the years, obviously for UAP, but we had this thing going, and it was a lot of it was established basically from some of the electrosmog concerns over in the UK, which is kind of, it's a much bigger deal over there than it is over here. And we were establishing those limits on Long Island, basically out to do surveys, EMI surveys, see what kind of emissions were possibly related to cancer clusters and that sort of thing. So it was a natural progression for us.
When you say EMI, electromagnetic
interference,
exactly.
Electromagnetic effects, on the human body especially.
I've also never heard the phrase electrosmog. I think that's
that's a European
term that's used in Europe.
Yeah, European term. It's they look at everything as when it's convoluted as it is, when you have a mixture of all these emissions, so radio emissions from all different sources, they call it electrosmog, which kind of makes sense.
And they basically look at the health effects.
Right.
They also look at the electrosensitivities, the human sensitivity levels to transmitting radio waves and that kind of thing.
And the European Union has a lot of those limits published and so forth, and a lot of our equipment is European equipment. It's so we kind of looked at that focus because of we were looking at specific quantities of that information, of that data.
So basically that translated over when we talked to Avi about this, we talked to his scientists. We had meetings with his scientists. Avi had brought us on board as affiliates to assist their engineering team in helping them develop their platform, which they were developing. Then these were 2 tracks. We had this mobile platform, which we were going to take one direction, and Avi wanted a fixed platform that they could use, and so we assisted their engineering team in helping develop that platform. And then we obviously took 2 different directions.
Yeah.
And the first of those platforms lives on the roof of the Harvard Observatory in Cambridge. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, it was originally slated to be on the roof, but there was some issues with that, and I believe they have it out at there's a piece of land out there that they have it on, like
Pigeon Run,
I believe. And that's where the equipment is basically parked and being utilized and being developed at this point.
So you helped them develop that platform before you had your first sort of 10-month stakeout with Nightcrawler. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. We assisted in the development of that platform.
Okay, cool. And I just skipped ahead by accident and shared the name of your RV. Is that correct? Nightcrawler is what you call it?
Yes.
We've actually 2 versions of the Nightcrawler.
Okay.
One was a bottom-up design, which took us a year to design and build. But the only thing was, it was more like a tank. It was very bulky, and it was kind of slow on the roads. We used it for the first several months of our study, and then what we did is end up obtaining another RV, and we just modified that, and that was more of a
something a little more
top-down design.
Yeah, a little more practical as far as being on the roadway.
It was more mobile and more, made more sense.
It's
okay. Is the first one the one that had kind of like a homemade Faraday cage involved with like metal mesh in the walls?
Yeah, it's a dark gray. It actually looks like a military tank.
Yeah, the weight was definitely a problem, and it was a little bit too high for the road, some of the roadways with bridges and that sort of thing. And and the camera systems, that was another problem. Of course, you can't have cameras under bridges and all that other jazz, and they had to be either shut off, blocked, or whatever. But so we ended up refining that, and an RV was definitely the answer. 30-foot C-class mobile home converted over to a laboratory, and it's got all the fixings. It's doesn't quite have a complete Faraday cage, but it can be simply done because a lot of it does have the internal mesh necessary to isolate that.
Most of the Faraday cages there.
Yeah.
Are you saying that stuff is kind of standard with RVs anyway, or are you saying that you?
No, not at all.
This is more of an addition because we want to protect the equipment from any extraneous EMI transmissions.
Yeah, straight.
That might interfere with our equipment.
Yeah, and that straight pickup. Some of the sites that we've been out, especially Robert Moses State Park out here on Long Island, you have a big 5G tower up there, and of course that's blaring out nice, powerful microwave signals, and we want to isolate some of our equipment from that, and we don't want that to be a kind of an outlier for us.
Sure.
And so we wanted to shield, of course, those kind of emissions.
Interesting. So did you mount panels on the inside, or you wrap something around the outside?
It's actually a mesh within the inner and outer walls. It's a wire mesh. It's a fine wire mesh, and the mesh is basically designed to be within the wavelength or short of the wavelength that it would block the wavelength of radio waves. So you could take a cell phone in there, and once it's all completely covered, the cabin, you just throw a net over, and you wouldn't have any cell phone signals. It would block it all. So it keeps the instrumentation from picking up that stray stuff, and we're basically focused on what's out in front of us. In this case, we're looking over the ocean. So we want to make sure that some of those signals are not being, hammered in and affecting our data.
So when you build the tank one that looks like something Batman would use, is that what you deploy for your phase one?
That was
for the first 3 to 4 months of phase one.
Phase one. Yeah.
Phase one.
Yeah.
Okay. So, phase 1A.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you take that out nearby your home, or are you living out of Nightcrawler at that point?
The Nightcrawler is basically kept at my house. Kept at my home, and we're about I guess we're about 15 miles from Robin Moses. from the shoreline.
Where you
And yeah, well, US New North Shore. I'm on the South Shore. I mean, I'm roughly about 4 miles from the ocean. You
Okay.
know? And I should say the bay. Then of course the ocean. It's 8 miles altogether. So you know, the Robert Moses State Park is fairly local to me. You know, I'm considered the South Shore, and he's considered the North Shore. And you know, we try to get out there. You know, we were getting out there several times a week, and we're still getting out there at least once a week. You know, to try to maintain this research and document anything additional that we can. And it's been quite a journey. Quite a journey.
So let's dig into these phases a little bit. Part one is you build, phase 1A is you build Nightcrawler Original Gangster Edition, and you deploy it for the first 3 months and get some, you start to get some like baseline data.
Right.
And you're, during this time, you're figuring out what all the regular stuff looks like what the signatures visually and auditory are of planes and helicopters and drones and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we're recording all those profiles, but we want to eliminate the prosaics. And we had written a paper. We also wrote a book on it that's out there. It's called The Nightcrawler Eye on the Sky.
Nightcrawler Eye on the Sky, you guys. This is on Amazon. You can pick it up right now.
And it outlines basically the months and the time spent in eliminating the prosaic. We outlined all of that stuff, you know, and we tried to identify, you know, we were at 35 miles from a huge municipal airport, John F. Kennedy Airport out of Long Island here. And what we wanted to do was isolate the common stuff that you would see in the sky. And, you know, some of that stuff can be tricky. It can be tricky. You know, you got planes that are in holding patterns and so forth. They have certain kind of lighting structures, you know, strobes and that sort of thing, landing and runway lighting. And it's difficult, you know, at times when they are in a holding pattern to decipher exactly what it is. I mean, you see this bright light in the sky, and it's one of the strobe lights or strobe lights from the plane. And they could be in a particular place for, you know, for several minutes, you know. So we wanted to isolate that. We wanted to have a means of doing that very quickly. And, you know, of course, having active radar systems, which we had to go through the FCC in order to get those licensing, the experimental license. We use active radar, we use hyperspectral cameras, and we use zoom cameras as well, very sensitive night vision zoom cameras. So we want to be able to see the fuselage. We want to be able to identify that aircraft. And thermal camera was another way, another approach. You know, again with an optical zoom thermal camera where we can identify that fuselage because of its heat source. You know, it's against the background of a cold sky. You know, it's easy to identify. You know, so
you'll use software, ADSB. ADSB. We track the transponder signals of the aircraft.
Right. Maritime apps. You look at buoy data. I mean, there was we looked at shipping traffic out there. You know, all these things that, you know, that could confound what we were trying to do, confound the data. We wanted to eliminate as possible. You know, any kind of prosaic explanation, given a prosaic explanation.
Yeah, and that took like probably the first 3 months. Where we were actually very confident in that we had to eliminate the prosaics, and what we left over is the second bin of unknowns or outliers, or anomalies.
That was our other bucket.
And normally we would look at the sky. Air traffic usually starts to cut down after 11 or 12 at night. It cuts down dramatically. That's where we spend most of the time doing our observations. And we also mapped out the flight corridor, so we knew it was there. We would steer away from the flight corridor and focus on the skies, you know, where that wouldn't be an issue at all.
Right. But there were times we would also focus on the flight corridor as well.
To see if there was anything in the
because there was times with, you know, I mean, I've had personal observations of unusual air traffic in the flight paths of these planes. You know, I live close to an airport, and I've had at least 2 occasions where I've seen objects that shouldn't have been as close as they were to these airliners. And they were out there. They did some unusual things, and we wanted to be cognizant of it. You know, we wanted to make sure that, you know, that some of that stuff was recorded, and we actually did record an object that was in the flight path of an airliner.
Really?
And so yeah, so it's you know, of course, you know, you see some of the reports that are out there on, you know, there was one in what's the airport north, LaGuardia Airport, and on an approach, a passenger actually videotaped something that had gone past the aircraft, and she was able to capture it on a video, unexplained. You know, and this has happened on several occasions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you know, this is something that we, you know, of course we understand what we're looking at that point, but we also want to be able to periodically look up there and record something that shouldn't be up there. You know, and that's something that we definitely want to report.
And to your point about these recordings, you must have hundreds and hundreds of hours of recorded data.
Yeah, quite a bit. Quite a bit.
And that's the biggest part of the work, is actually doing a data analysis. You're going through hours and hours of video footage, and not only video footage, but instrumental footage of, you know, from spectrum analyzers and Geiger counters and acoustic sensors, environmental monitors, you name it.
Wow, so, this is probably a sort of ridiculously simplistic question, but how many different kinds of instruments do you guys have on the current version of Nightcrawler?
Right now we have the list it's probably about 40 different pieces of equipment that we're using. There's a mixture of spectrum analyzers, RF, optical, acoustic. We have environmental sensors with ionizing radiation. We have ozone. We measure, of course, the meteorological significance as well. You know, humidity
and pressure,
dew point.
Air pressure.
Yeah, we're looking at the cloud-based ceiling, the cloud-based height.
We use LiDAR rangefinders.
LiDAR, obviously radar, but we have SDR radio that we're using as well. You know, so you know, all of this stuff it comes into play. You know, with gathering, you know, the data that we need to gather. We're looking at certain specific signals that are, I guess, somewhat commonly known. They talk about the 1.6 gigahertz signal, and there's a 3 gigahertz signal that seems to come up all the time. We're constantly looking at those signals, and you know, we have recorded some of that stuff as well, and also ultrasonic data as well.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what that means? A signal?
Yeah, well, the signal itself is. I guess the thought on that is that accompanying these objects, there seems to be some kind of a carrier signal. They're saying it's 1.6 gigahertz. I know maybe I don't know where exactly started, Skinwalker Ranch, possibly, but I know there was some talk. Some of the military aircrafts have detected that as well. Also, 3 gigahertz is another significant signal. Whether or not it has to do with with these things in the signals accompanied with them in the presence of these objects, but they seem to be very specific, and we're also looking at the ultrasonic end of those signals, which we've seen also. There's some significance between the ultrasonic and the magnetic signals with our magnetometers. They seem to correlate.
So to that point, do you have a kind of software hub into which all these data streams are coming so that you can kind of correlate them and compare?
Yes, everything is recorded. A lot of the times we use quad recorders. We want to be looking at multiple chains of data at the same time. They're recorded individually, but we can see them for comparison visually. You know, and they're recorded, not just on monitors and for visual aid, but we also have the data down in specific spreadsheets and that sort of thing. You know, the actual numbers. But it's something that you have to look at. It's not just a matter of going through the data and looking for this peaks and valleys of these signals. You have to visualize it, and we have multispectral cameras where we're looking at these cameras at any one time. We can be looking at 8 cameras altogether. But we're looking at them side by side on a multi-view system.
So you're looking at like 8 different feeds in the same area of the sky.
Right. So you'd be looking at, thermal cameras, long wave, short wave, near infrared, visible light, UV light, A, B, and C. We'd have UVs and C detectors, data streams that are running on another monitor. So you're making all these comparisons, and that's all compared, of course, to our detection systems, the radar systems themselves. So we'll be looking at that radar data and making that comparison.
Okay, so this leads to a really interesting phenomenon that I've heard you describe. This is after you've got your 3 months baseline, you start seeing some really interesting stuff. And some of these objects, correct me if I'm wrong, have a quality of occasionally winking out of one area of the visual light spectrum or some other sort of sensor spectrum, and then simultaneously either appearing or remaining in a different area of the spectrum. Is that phenomenon what led you to kind of combine these cameras so that you could look at them from different parts of the spectrum?
We were doing that to begin with, but
Okay.
that confirmed what we were seeing. The fact we were layering the data, and it made it much more significant that these are happening. We were able to compare the different, like having the different spectral cameras on the same targets. We could see the changes in spectral range from one object to another, and some of them vary as spectral ranges at the same time. So that's how we came about the thought that these things seem to be varying their spectral signatures out there.
Interesting, which you mentioned in other interviews looked to you like it might be some kind of signature management.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and it's there's sometimes you'll visualize it, you'll see it in one camera, you'll see this, you'll fade out, and you'll see it bloom up in another camera. Or there'll be times that it just disappears. It's not on any of the cameras. So is this high speed? Is it moving? Is it cloaking out? Is it changing its spectral signature? And these are all the things that we were looking for.
It typically would be,
and it was a combination of all of that stuff too.
Right. Typically would be within the IR range. You see the variation, but up to the visible range, and occasionally be in the visible spectrum where you can actually see these objects. But that was kind of rare. It was more often they would appear in the IR range.
Right. And there was times that we have, there's you have a UVC range as well, and this is on the other end of the spectrum.
Ultraviolet color.
Yes, ultraviolet, violet, and then it's into the ultraviolet. So this particular frequency is this wavelength is much higher with a much lower with a much higher frequency. So monitoring that, we had various different cameras, which they're expensive. The UVC cameras are expensive, UVC A and B, and we're looking at also UVC, and UVC is a little bit more. It's a lot more difficult to visualize, and we have detectors for that, and the detectors are very sensitive. We use a system of detectors that are used for basically scanning for fires, from an aircraft at 30,000 feet, 38,000 feet. I mean, you can have somebody with a campfire and a plane flying overhead that's looking for this stuff at 15, 20,000 feet can spot it very easily by detection of UVC radiation. That's a specific wavelength from 160 to 200 nanometers. So we have detectors just for that. And we've had them trip. We've had these detectors trip with some of these observations, which indicates whether this could be, some kind of a plasma that's giving off. It could be some kind of an electrical discharge that has corona around it, giving off a corona. This is also part of that mix. So we're seeing it on either end of the spectrum from the visible light, and of course we're seeing it way up the spectrum as well. This is stuff that we monitor all the time.
So while we're near to this visual information, does it make sense to ask what do these things look like? Or is that a question that doesn't quite make sense?
Yeah,
there's a lot of descriptions out there. They seem to have multiple shapes, or they can morph, or whether or not they're in specific areas of the world. I don't know. If for a time it was Tic Tacs on the West Coast and orbs on the East Coast, but we're seeing a combination of them all over the place. And
the basic morphology we're seeing is most of the time we're seeing these orb-like objects, the more spherical,
Okay.
On more rare occasions, we would see the more cylindrical shapes or ovaloid shapes. But most of the time, we would see these spherical objects. They were highly luminous, mostly in the infrared, sometimes in the visible. If the luminosity seemed to increased a lot, we would see it in the visible. And when their luminosity decreased, they would also be rotating. They also show rotation. And when the luminosity would drop, we would see structure. And to us, it looked like they appear to have a polyhedral structure,
Some kind of complex,
multi-phase, multi-flex face structure, but still in a kind of a round shape.
Right. And so I know some of the Navy pilots have described it as a cube.
A cube in a sphere.
In a sphere.
I mean, that could be accounted for, the fact that it's a polyhedron of some type.
Or there's something else going on around,
or some kind of some kind of envelope,
some kind of in a field or
a field around them,
gravitational or electrical, electromagnetic.
This is fascinating. How about motion? Have you seen some of the observables in action, like sudden stopping or abrupt acceleration? The motion.
We've observed them in several of those parameters, and we actually have videos of them. Stopping, sudden stops. We've have instantaneous acceleration, especially when we try to paint. When we have CNI, we try to paint the sky with an IR emitter or some kind of high luminous torch. They'll actually try to evade that light, and they'll suddenly take off. You'll see this instantaneous acceleration, but they'll do they'll do a curve around the light.
Interesting.
And
in response to your instrument.
Yeah, try to leave the field of view.
Or it could be just abrupt linear motion.
Sometimes abrupt linear motion. Sometimes they would just be stationary for long periods of time.
Yeah, like pseudo stars. It's.
Yeah, and some of them, we've had objects that we at first they would appear to be stars, and they would suddenly move.
Interesting. And I heard you mention in another interview that they could be stationary during high winds.
Oh yeah,
yes,
they'd be completely fixed, which is not something that's really possible with our technology that we currently have. I mean, helicopters, you get strong winds, and they move around. Yeah, they're not fixed.
I mean, one particular sighting was, that demonstrated this was back in August 22, and we saw a triangular formation, and they seemed to be 3 individual objects. It was that night we had 35-mile-an-hour wind gusts, strong winds. We observed this thing over the ocean, over the shore, and approximately, we did a range finding roughly about 1,000 meters out, and these objects. I'm sorry, 1,000 meters, 1,000 feet out, not meters, 1,000 feet out.
Wow, from you?
That's
pretty close.
Yeah, it was pretty close.
Yeah, it was pretty close.
And we were able to take a torch flashlight and a spotlight and bounce that light off of the objects. Whoa. So they were that close. I mean, they were out there. These objects. We have a central monitor back in the RV that's night vision, and we could see these things clearly with a night vision camera, but we could not visualize it. We could not see it with our eyeballs. It was completely invisible. We had 4 people out there. Nobody could see this thing, only with the NV optics. Only with the NV optics.
Highly luminous in the IR, but completely invisible, in the visible way.
Right. And what we ended up doing was, we'll take a dry erase marker and we'll mark the monitor right on the surface of the monitor where this object is with a fixed camera system. And we'll look at it 45 minutes later. It's still there in that one spot. So we know it's not a star constellation. We know it's and the fact that it returns light, it reflects light. It's not a star. It's and it's something that's relatively close
with mass and with some kind of reflective surface.
And did I hear you say that you were unable to determine whether it was in fact 3 separate objects or part of one triangular object?
We believe it was 3
shape like that.
Yeah, we believe it was 3 separate objects.
Okay.
There was a point it was actually there for about 45 minutes in that position, but after a 45-minute mark, it actually dissipated. We have the camera. We sweep back with our camera, and actually the objects actually dissipate, and they all disappear. And what's left, you'll see a large, bright red sphere that suddenly flashes out and then all the objects are just not
Right.
are gone.
And this is suddenly after 40, or after the 45-minute
Yeah,
mark.
45-minute mark.
You know, we had swung the camera around to look at something else, bringing our camera systems. You could see this motion of this red object, and that was it. They were gone. You know.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is so interesting. I'm curious about how this has been making you guys feel as you're experiencing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of surreal, to be honest with you. It's if we didn't have the footage that we captured of it, you would question it.
Yeah,
you know
you
what you
definitely-
actually saw.
You would
know?
question your memory. You would question
Yeah,
all
you
of
would-
this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, we we go back on the video and say, well, wait a minute. You know, let's take a look at that again. You know,
Yeah,
it's,
we've looked at the video many
you know,
times.
and just the experience that we had down there too, the physical experience from it. You know, it's
Should we double click on that? Would you like
Yeah.
to walk
Sure.
through it? I know you've spoken about it in other places, so
Sure.
if
Yeah.
you want to keep it light, that's fine.
That's fine.
yeah. So this is something that, you know, we were hesitant to bring it into the report. You know,
Because of the
ridicule and that sort of thing. It's you know, it's you know, approaching it as it from a science point of view.
Mhm.
But you know, after talking to other scientists and so forth, that we feel we have to present all the data. You know,
Mhm.
even this, which is basically subjective to us. But
The Tedesco sensors.
yes, it's, you know, being out there. I mean, this triangular pattern of light. Gerry and I went down to the water once we had seen this on a central monitor.
Yeah, I
we
should say with
decided-
time this occurred at about 12:15, almost a quarter after 12 at night. We first noticed it we have a central monitor inside the RV where this triangular appeared directly in front of us off the coastline. So John and I, our team was setting up the equipment. John and I went out to the water's edge to try to record this with portable.
which is exactly
system.
it's 106 meters from where the RV was from the
Yeah.
lab. So we walked down to the water's edge, and we brought out with us some NV cameras. And at the time, we should, you know, in retrospect, I know we should have brought out some of the monitoring sensors, the radiation monitors, and that sort of thing, you know, environmental sensors. But with what we grabbed, the, you know, a few of the cameras, the NV cameras, and they were different.
I'm sorry, is NV a brand name or does that say?
It's a night vision.
Yeah,
Night
it's
vision.
just
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And so we went down to the water's edge. I had a Lunar Optics, which is a binocular style NV system, night vision system. Gerald had binocular style, and they're slightly different wavelengths. So Gerald saw it, visualized it in his camera, and it wasn't quite well defined. You could see the lighting pattern. There was a lot of noise in the camera.
Yeah, it was another interesting thing. The closer I got to the
the water's
shoreline,
edge,
the noisier the image and the sound would get. So we believe this was some kind of electromagnetic interference.
Of some sort. Yeah.
John's camera has a high resolution, didn't pick up the noise in that way.
Yeah, mine's a metal body. So
Yeah.
the metal body probably helped with some of that emissions. Right. But looking at it, my camera has a slightly higher wavelength. The camera Gerry used was 1100 nanometers. Mine goes slightly above 12.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And mine showed the objects very vivid, very vivid, very luminous, and we were able to, you know, visualize it with both cameras. But like I said, mine showed much more depth and greater detail with a lot less noise. And it's a significance to the noise too, because these cameras have something called an automatic gain control. So the weaker the signal gets, what happens is the amplifiers in the camera try to increase the gain to bring in, you know, a more detailed signal. Gerald's camera was maxed out. It was at its maximum gain setting. Mine wasn't quite there yet, you know, but so my image was clearer because the wavelength seemed to be closer to the 1200 nanometers than it was back toward the visible light, which we know wasn't visible.
And again, it's just not visible to the naked eye.
Naked eye.
Yeah,
Not at all.
not at all.
Not at all.
And
No
it's-
sound.
Also, it's dark, right?
Yep, dark.
Yeah, it's very dark.
It's you know, there's no light pollution at all down by the water. It's it was I don't believe we had any full moon. I think at that time was a new moon, and
yeah, it was. Yeah.
and you know, when we saw these objects, you know, the only thing that was out there, not even stars. I mean, at that point, the stars were higher up. This was low over the horizon. And when we approached the edge of the water, you know, by the edge of the beach by the water, I had been looking through my lunar optics, and I had a rangefinder on, and the rangefinder basically puts out, it's 950 nanometers of light, and that's invisible. It's infrared light. So it's in the beam, and the beam, it's a small beam spot size. It's you know, roughly, it leaves the camera at about 25 millimeters, and once it's out there, and we were gauging at 1,000 feet. I mean, the light itself could have spread out maybe 4 feet.
Okay.
At that point. So
it's like a cone that's coming out of your camera, a cone of light.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as I was looking at this object, I had the rangefinder going. And I saw another object move just to the right of the triangle and move in front of it. And what I'm doing is I at that point I said, you know, let me put the rangefinder on. I'm hitting it with the rangefinder, and the rangefinder flashes every 1 second. You know, so as I'm looking at this thing, I noticed all of a sudden, after about 6 or 7 times of waving this thing in front of him with the laser pointer, illuminating it at that point too, the object suddenly moved into the shore. What I saw was a rectangular beam of light being returned, almost like it was hitting some kind of a lenticular lens and giving it that shape. So I could see my rangefinder going off, and every 1 second it got closer and closer, and within 2 seconds it was on top of us.
Whoa.
And at that point, I didn't know what to make of it. It was startling, because it's, you know, here I'm looking at this rangefinder light bouncing off this rectangular object way out at sea, at least 1,000 feet from us, and within, like I said, in a very short period of time, it was on top of us. So, you know, at that point, I said to my brother, I said, you know, something had moved in very closely. I said, you know, let's get away from the water shore.
And at that time, I actually detected it on my camera. I actually saw a bluish flash of light on the water.
Right.
So I was seeing something come, and it was, but that time it was already on top.
Right. And then the last frame of video you had was a chevron pattern of light.
Right.
On the beach.
So I should say we started running towards the RV to get away from it, because we weren't sure.
Well, we tried.
We weren't sure what this was.
We tried. It's as I turned to walk away from the shore, my legs gave out. I collapsed on the sands. And the weird thing about it is I couldn't coordinate my legs under me. I couldn't get my legs under me to pick myself up. You know, I had whether it had to do with strength or it's just I couldn't coordinate it. I couldn't coordinate that function. There you are.
Damn.
We lost it for a moment.
You saw you freeze up, and then that was the last. It was all right. Let me continue.
Yeah, that was
that's where we left off.
spooky for viewers. My computer shut down out of the blue. All the power dropped. Yeah, maybe my computer was scared. This is a
hitchhiker effect.
Yeah, gosh, I hope not. Okay, so you're describing an object that is coming toward you. You're bouncing this light off it once a second. Is this a visible light that's coming from your rangefinder?
It's infrared. I believe I said before it's 950. It's actually 905 nanometers. It's okay. It's the infrared spectrum.
Okay.
And it's an invisible beam of light. You can see it, of course, in your night vision cameras because it's sensitive to the infrared. So I would see this object every time that rangefinder would go off. I'd see this rectangular object out there. And within 2 seconds, I saw several frames, 2 to 3 seconds, several frames of this thing. And in the last frame, it looked like it was on top of us. And that's when I turned to my brother and I said, let's get away from the shore. Let's get away from. I had no idea what this was.
And at that time, my camera started to pick up something when it was towards the shoreline. I had this bluish flash of light.
Hmm.
But by that time, it was already on top of us.
Right, and that bluish flash of light was invisible. It wasn't real. It wasn't
Right.
visible.
It was invisible.
It was infrared.
Yeah. It was the IR.
And they had the shape of a chevron. It's like a chevron pattern on the sand. So at that
Well, I'm
point,
sorry. What had a chevron pattern on the sand?
the last image from my brother's camera, Gerry's camera, there was only 1 or 2 frames that was taking at a 60 frame rate of the camera. You could only see 2 frames of this chevron pattern of light.
Yeah, what happens? When I looked at it. We both started running towards the shoreline.
We tried.
We tried. John collapsed on the sand. He lost the muscle tone in his legs, and he couldn't get off the sand.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't coordinate my legs.
Yeah.
I can't really describe exactly what it was. It was whether I had no strength or I just simply couldn't coordinate my legs to get them under me to pick myself up. You know, and the effect lasted for I would say roughly about 45 seconds. Gerald, immediately after me collapsing, reached down to help me to pull me up, and he collapsed.
But before I did that, I panned the camera back, and what I saw was a wave, which we captured maybe a frame or 2 on the video. It was a large wave of IR energy that was sweeping over us.
Yeah, that was the chevron pattern. That we described.
Okay.
It might kind of look like a wave,
Right.
and
It must have been so scary, guys.
yeah, it was startling. And then when John collapsed, I didn't know why he was on the ground. He couldn't get up, so I grabbed him, tried to pull him up, and by that time he was regaining strength in his legs quickly. I started running back towards the RV, the lab again, and I collapsed immediately after. And it lasted about less than a minute, but it was the same thing. It was I felt I had no muscle tone. It was almost like a flaccid paralysis.
Right.
Wow.
It was I can't even wrap my head around it. It's
And the feeling was from the waist down. I mean,
right.
There was no loss in strength in the arms or anything else. I actually trying to pull myself through the sand with my arms, but I couldn't. We couldn't pour it out.
Right. And this was recorded at the time, so you could hear me saying, my brother was saying, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I can't get up. I can't get up."
Yeah, you hear that in the recording,
and that's in the recording.
The other thing is that what was recording at the same time is John's camera was working intermittently, and actually recorded sections of that. And what was happening, which was quite interesting, we didn't know it then, but when we took the cameras back to review them, the data later on that night or early in the next morning, is there was actually a sphere of light inside the camera. There was all kinds of lighting effects. It looks like a ball of light got beyond the iris of the camera, and it was doing a lot of different things, flashing. It was creating these spaghetti streamers. You saw these flashes of beams of light. It was also manipulating the mechanical parts of the camera. You hear clicks. So it looked like something was inside the optics of the camera.
Right. And one thing about the cameras, whether it's a night vision or visible light, a regular commercial grade camera, they have something in there called the iris system. There's an iris motor and a diaphragm. And that diaphragm, if there's too much light getting into the camera, into the optics, that diaphragm closes down to reduce the amount of light. Now, when this thing was going off, you could see that it was, and I'm a camera technician. I've seen this before, where when those iris motors are not working, they have a tendency to bloom, and you could see banding where the CCD is. You could see this bright, intense light that can actually burn the CCD. It can damage the CCD. Mm-hmm. That was the case with this camera. Is that iris motor, whether it was stuck, it didn't operate correctly, but this thing was beyond that iris motor. And it was near the optics, the CCD optics of the camera, the imager.
Wow. So it sounds like what you guys are describing is something that went inside the camera, some like Tinkerbell-like entity that popped in and kicked around.
That's a good way to describe it.
Could very well be.
A good way to describe it.
Maybe the least scary thing that happened that night. Just lingering here briefly, when you say you watched this object get closer to you until it was almost on top of you, what was the visual quality of this rectangle that you were seeing? Did it look metallic? Was it white, dark?
It was with the night vision camera. It doesn't give you much clarity with color. I mean, all I could say, it looked like a whitish blue light, and or a bluish white light, and it was geometric. It was definitely a rectangle. It was a geometric pattern. In my mind, there's no question about that. But that pattern never changed. It just got bigger with every frame. It just got bigger.
And this may be some kind of lensing from whatever the surface, whatever composite that surface was on that object. It was returning the flashes of light, the emission of the IR.
Right. It's not like taking a flashlight and pointing it into a mirror. It's like taking a flashlight and pointing it into a lens of a car, a car lens or a headlight lens.
And it diffuses that light.
And it diffuses it and gives you basically the shape of the light, but it'll glow.
It's the shape of the lens, right? The shape of the lens.
And that's what I believe happened, is that the beam is pretty intense from the rangefinder, and I believe that there was some kind of a lenticular structure, a lensing effect, that caused me to see a rectangle.
Interesting. Can you explain the word lenticular to me? I'm sorry that I don't understand it, but I'm ignorant about that.
Yeah, so a lenticular lens, basically, for the sake of visualization, it's kind of to carry contrast and shape, and it's wavelengths. It's light being produced in one direction. So if you had a monitor, like some of these monitors, they're security screens where you could put a lenticular lens over your computer monitor. Somebody on the side wouldn't see that light. Only you would see it.
That's to do with the surface shape.
Right.
Of the lens. It's a surface shape.
And it gathers light in such a way that displaces the light evenly across the whole lens.
Okay.
So it's not just in a mirror. You hit a plate, you'd see the shape of the bulb. You'd see the lens. You'd see the round light. If it was a square lead, you'd see the square lead. In this case, it was just the shape of something else.
So it was like controlling the light that you were shooting out back at you. So is your theory that the object itself didn't necessarily get closer, but it pushed your light back toward you somehow, or you think the object would have had to approach you?
We actually believe it got closer because that reflection was getting larger.
Okay.
It was coming towards the shoreline, but it was reflecting the light back.
Right.
As it was closer, it was getting.
So
there was the lenticular effect is the surface geometry of that object is creating that lenticular effect.
Okay, so the takeaway I'm getting is you're saying that doesn't necessarily mean the object itself was rectangular. That's just how the light was coming back to you. Is that right?
Yeah.
All we know is there was a light. There was something that was heading at a high rate of speed towards us, and it was reflecting that transmitted light back.
Right.
So let's go ahead.
Yeah, and I also wanted to say that if you look at some of these images taken, there was, I know some airline pilots have taken them. You see them on YouTube, and there was objects that look like cubes. One went past an air. I don't remember what the airliner was. I think it was down in South America.
Colombia, I think.
Colombia, and a pilot had recorded an object, and it looked like a cube. But on that cube, it looked like a rectangular surface.
There's one lit surface.
One
that was rectangular.
Bright surface. And I know that it's been described before by other people where there seems to be almost like that's why I guess they call it a cube, because it's got that shape. And we're wondering is if there's one side of that cube that's either luminous or it's reflective. There's something there that's causing that reflection.
I know also fits that what we're talking about is that polyhedral shape. You have this multiple flat-sided and surface of it, and one of those flat sides is, of course, where the light is hitting. Right. And whether it's for highly reflective or it's emitting light, it's
right. And we've seen they seem to create unusual geometric patterns. It's we have recordings, night vision recordings over a beach area that seems to it shows an object that is rectangular. It's got a rectangular luminous side, and not square. It's rectangular, and this rectangle moves both vertically and horizontally, synchronized vertically, horizontally as it's rotating. So it's not something that you'd see where you could see it through its rotation. You'd see this rectangle move through a rotation. It's just like it seems like it turns on when it's vertical, more vertical than it is horizontal.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
It's winking on and off.
Yeah, it's very controlled. It's very controlled. And there are other times we see them that they rotate randomly, and you'll see parts of it. You'll see some luminous side, almost like a disco ball effect. Where if you were lighting it, you could see that rotate around. When it's 180 degrees, they go dark. You don't see anything until that luminous side comes around again. So there is some interesting geometry to it.
Interesting.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, the essential thing to me is everything brings it back to this point that it seems to have a polyhedral shape in order for these dynamics to happen.
Right. And it does. And when we the four of us had actually gone back that night, back down to the shore, the object was still, like I said, it was out there for 45 minutes. Four of us had gone down there with night vision cameras and so forth, and I ended up going down there with a visible light torch. And as I waved that torch in front of it, I could light it up as well. You could see it. You could see the reflections from these objects,
and we saw other objects appearing around it.
Right,
that would move horizontally along the shoreline, but at points in time actually appear to come closer to us, then back off, and actually go under the water.
And this is visible light range now, or you're still in?
No,
this was still in the infrared, but it looked like it was reflected. Had a reflective surface and was reflecting the visible light. If shining at it.
Yeah, if I hit it with the torch, the visible light torch, you could see it visibly
through the night vision.
Yep, or the night vision if you're looking at night vision. Of course, the night vision would enhance it. Every time I hit it, you could see that it got brighter. It's reflecting that light back.
So you were getting some visible spectrum response when you hit it with the torch.
When you hit it with the light, yes. So it wasn't giving off. In other words, it wasn't giving off luminous,
but it was still reflective.
It was reflecting that light.
It was reflective. Right.
Yeah.
Very clever, guys. Yeah. So you just mentioned that there was maybe some in and out of the water activity happening, some transmedium. Here's another of the 5 observables in action.
And like I said, it's when and the other part of it that I wanted to talk about too is that when we hit it with the light, with the torch, you could see some kind of an outline around it. Almost looks like it was being diffused, almost like either a round field around it, or a translucent dome of some sort. But I know Ryan Graves described one of the pilot's sighting as a cube within a cube. A cube within a
sphere, translucent sphere.
Yeah. And it appeared to have that particular shape and visibility, and that's something that we also have. We have that data recorded as well.
That makes you question if that's is it a solid structure, or is it a field
that's an electric field, some electromagnetic
that's actually trapping the light?
Yeah, is it bending the light in such a way to give it that loss? We don't know. Maybe a gravitational lensing of some sort.
Yeah, gravitational bubble through which it's moving.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is fascinating and also terrifying. I'm glad you guys are okay, and I'm impressed with you for going back to the beach after being semi-paralyzed.
It's intellectual curiosity.
We had to garner up some courage to go back,
and we had two women with us.
Yeah, so we didn't want to look bad.
Yeah, so we didn't want to look bad.
That's so funny. I guess final detail here. I've heard you mention these crustaceans that you found.
Yes, that was the secondary feature of this. Is when we went back to the beach, and we were looking at this triangular object, and of course it was watching it for 45 minutes.
Almost 45.
Yeah, I panned my IR camera at the beach, and there was 2 bright objects that were on the beach. They were as bright as flashlights, but they were very small, the objects, but they would reflect. They were giving off a lot of light, all IR.
No visible light.
No visible, strictly IR.
Right.
So we approached these 2 small objects, and we determined that they were crustaceans. 2 crustaceans, a krill and a shrimp, only a few millimeters in size.
Tiny.
But they're emitting a tremendous amount of IR energy for some reason. And
emitting, not just reflecting, but like glowing
emitting the light, the energy. Wow. And these things were only a few feet where we had this initial encounter, that would affected us.
Yeah. Well, Gerry took note of it because as we walked down there, he saw it in his camera right away.
Yeah.
He said, "What's that on the beach?" And I had the lunar optics, and I turned over to look at it, and I see this bright, almost like somebody shining a flashlight back at you. That's how bright they were.
Yeah, extremely bright.
And we had walked over to it, so now we were focused on this other thing that's going on out there, while still trying to visualize the triangle that's out on the water. As we turned our attention over to the crustaceans, that's when I turned the camera back, and that's when we just saw this object just disappear.
That's when we saw them separate, and this bright flash, and everything was gone. So it's almost like we were distracted by the two crustaceans on the beach.
And the crustaceans were within 10 feet of where we were standing originally.
Right, and they were, and the fact they were emitting IR energy, our thought is, of course, they were exposed to the same IR energy we were exposed to. They seem to be supercharged with this energy for some reason. It wasn't bioluminescence. This was strictly infrared. We had taken it back. We put it in a sample container. We actually took it back to the RV, and I had examined them under a microscope. Both crustaceans had large openings in their thorax, like some kind of thermal expansion. If you superheated the inside and you ruptured out of them, that's what it looked like. So
like an avulsion.
An avulsion of the internal organs. And he sort of the exact same wound on both crustaceans.
Right.
And they're also desiccated. They're very dried out.
Right. And how could a dead animal produce bioluminescence? That's the other thing. Even if it was some kind of, I know bioluminescence is normally on the other wavelength, the other end of the scale toward blue light. But
it didn't make sense to emit that kind of IR energy.
Sense.
There's nothing that made sense.
It didn't make sense. And Gerry wondered whether or not it could have been attached to the object and fallen off.
Yeah, that was our thought, that maybe as this object moved to the shoreline, maybe it picked up these two crustaceans from the water and deposited them on the beach.
And these two were alone on the beach, basically. Did you have any other regular crustaceans, or no?
The only two crustaceans on the beach, and the only two emitting that IR energy. Yeah.
And did you keep them for future research?
Yes, we had kept them in a container. And the weird thing is, a day or two later, after we examined them, I put them back in the container. We left them in the RV.
Got to mark that very clearly in the fridge.
Yeah. When we looked at it again, all we saw was this conjugated chalk-like material that was left. There was, and we said, "Wait a minute, how did that get in there?" We had the two. We know we had that specimen container.
Confused.
Yeah, so it looked like something congealed, and it was like chalk. What was left is chalk.
And the IR effects had dissipated.
The IR effect had dissipated after an hour. It actually slowly had.
Okay.
Yeah, we watched it over an hour's period of time, and it basically, after an hour, there's no charge left on it.
Yeah, okay. And the weird thing is to have this chalk material left. It's almost like if you took something and you dehydrated, took all the water out of it or something, you would have this powder left. That's my thought.
Yeah.
So you have this conjugated material that's dehydrated and dried. That's the only thing I could think of. It was just the water was removed.
The
water content was removed.
I heard that you guys have spoken with Gerry Nolan at some point. Did you mention the crustaceans to him?
Yes, we had mentioned it. He had no answer.
Yeah, he had no answer.
He said he would ask. He would think about asking somebody, maybe that he was working with, who
in Stanford. Yeah,
who maybe a background in marine biology or something like that.
Right.
I was thinking he's a materials guy. Maybe he would want to look at stuff. Do you still have them around? Do you guys keep these, or did you put them in the lab?
we still have it. We still have it, but like I said, it's
you look like a
bizarre.
It's like a chalk, a hardened chalk. That's what he has left.
Yeah, just small pieces, very small pieces.
So is this the kind of grand finale of phase 1 for you? After this, do you take a break for a minute?
No, we're still going.
We took a break to write a book on phase 1 and produce a paper.
Right.
And then we went right after doing that. We took a few months off, 6 months or something like that, and we went back to phase 2.
Yeah, phase 2. So we got a peer-reviewed article out of it, peer-reviewed paper. We have a book out of it that it gives them a little more detail as far as what the study was, and
how should people find the peer-reviewed article? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so if you look online, it's the Open Journal of Applied Science, and you would just look up Eye on the Sky.
Okay. Study, yeah.
And Eye on the
Sky UAP study.
UAP study, and the article will come up.
It should come up, yeah.
And this led us to basically moving forward into like a phase 3, and we want to look closely at the USO side of it, which
that's where you're heading right now.
Exactly. This is over. We seem to believe that this is a manifestation of something that could be in the deep water trenches of the oceans, and we want to get a boat out there, and with the latest greatest sonar equipment, same thing with the radar systems, and a lot of analytical AI, and take this out on the ocean and see what we can discover. I mean, side scan sonar we want to use.
Yeah, basically it would be a shipworthy boat that would be retrofitted with equipment, so it becomes a Nightcrawler 3.
Yeah,
but a maritime version of it.
Right, ocean worthy. It's
the Night Swimmer.
Yeah,
blast that REM song.
Yeah.
Just quickly, phase 2 the writing that you did. Phase 1 is building the RVs and doing
phase 1
work.
is phase 2 is actually more of an instrumented study. We're looking specifically at radar returns that we've had unusual activity with,
and it involves
GPS data.
I should also say it involves 2nd and 3rd generation sensors. We actually integrated these sensors into smaller mini units.
Yeah.
The pods. We call
them pods.
That's and we're testing them right now. That's the phase 2.
Right.
And we're expanding the range of where we're testing it.
Yeah. And these pods, we were, what we'd like to do is expand locations to these pods. They're 4G, 5G. They can be put in a location, and the data can be analyzed from another site by multiple people.
So they can be static arrays.
Exactly.
Trigger.
And, that's like ongoing with this phase 3, where we really want to look at this USO side of it.
And the natural progression would be to expand it out on the water.
Right.
We have the land-based vehicle, but now we want a marine-based vehicle that we could take it further out and see what else is out there.
Do you imagine some of these arrays living in static locations, or are you guys really focused on the mobile operations?
We're focused on the mobile operations, but we would also have static locations for these portable sensing units.
There seems to be hotspots, we definitely want to hit those hotspots. There's no question.
I should say that the 3 pods for phase 2 that we've been testing, we actually have nicknames for them: Huey, Dewey, and Louie.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, integrated pod.
I don't know if you're familiar with a 1977's
72, I think
72 science fiction with it's called Silent Running.
No, I've never seen it.
And there's 3 environmental robots. They call them Huey, Dewey, and Louie. So
that's where they came from.
So we affectionately named the pods these names.
I had no idea that didn't come from DuckTales. So I'm curious about whether you guys have connected with some of the other institutions that are looking for things in the sky. Like I'm looking at Sky 360 and UAP Tracker, and then the ExoProbe project with the space laser awareness. Are any of these people reaching out?
The ExoProbe, I believe that's Beatrice Roel and the Tedesco project.
We've been working with
we've collaborated with her. We've collaborated with the Sky.
Yeah,
we're trying to.
Yeah, the tracker, and also there's 360 Sky 360. We've also heard from. We've also heard from another. Actually, he donated some equipment to us. UAP detector.
Oh, cool.
And we're putting it through its paces now, and I'll tell you so far there's been some positive results. It kind of agrees with our instrumentation that what he's produced. He donated 2 of them, and we've been using them side by side with ours.
So I just said
and we're
cool.
certainly open to that.
Right.
We want to explore all possibilities. If there's something that's out on the market that can detect these things, we certainly want to put it through its paces and give an honest assessment of what what it can do.
No, and we're open to collaboration.
Absolutely.
I mean, not everybody wants to do that.
Yeah,
it's very difficult.
It's tough. A lot of institutions want to work, and
they want to work
in silos,
basically,
and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because there are resources available that can be utilized and that sort of thing, and of course the knowledge base with certain people, not just with academia, but you got a lot of professionals out there, and you got professional pilots and so forth. These are some of your best observers. They got to work with these people. They have to be shut down from that. And I've heard comments that they're no better at observations than the scientists. That, and look, that's not true. I mean, there's these pilots, they're experienced looking at this stuff at certain altitudes and recognizing aircraft from other from biomass or something else. And we have to trust them to some extent.
Yeah, it's different from a layperson looking at a cloud.
Sure, exactly. Sure, absolutely.
But so to your point about collaborating with, it sounded like a yes to Sky 360, yes to UAP tracker, yes to exoprobe, and then there's this fourth one, UAP detector, and of course Galileo, which has been trying to build out some of these things. I also have heard Kevin Knuth talk about building a sensor array.
So we've been collaborating with Kevin and
quite a bit.
Also with the UAPX team.
UAPX.
Yeah.
Okay. So where I'm driving this is one of the better points I think the NASA panel made last year, 2023, was they said sensor calibration is going to be an issue here in terms of delivering high quality science. And I wondered if you guys had any thoughts about that as people who work with sensors.
It depends on what they mean by that. I mean, you want to buy sensors that normally you want high quality sensors, and the companies that make these high quality sensors, they're put to a test phase. They're to vibration testing, environmental testing, parameter testing. You want, if you pick the highest quality sensors, they're going to be going to the full range of tests, and they come with what's called CFCs, so certificate of compliance. And that quality is actually built into it. They're actually standardized.
Oh,
so cool. You have to look at that. I mean, obviously, if you're going to get like a second-rate sensor, you're not going to get that quality. Plus, once you get that, of course, you're going to test it out in the field. You're going to run controls and that kind of thing. I mean, that's what you should mean by calibration,
right? And I mean, you can, let's face it. I mean, you can have a cheap piece of equipment, you can calibrate it, and it falls out of calibration in a short period of time. Calibration certificates generally are good for 6 months to a year. But of course, higher quality equipment, higher quality instrumentation is not going to be susceptible to those drawbacks. Where the sensor falls out of calibration.
Okay.
But I do agree with calibration standards. I come from that. With
it's just that they
laboratories, everything we work to standards. We work and those standards, our equipment, everything is calibrated on a regular basis.
Right, they're just going to define what that means.
Right, and again, you got to look out to the instrumentation people, the instrumentation engineers,
applications experts.
These are the people that calibrate the sensors. These are the people who know the sensor. Give the sensor to somebody else that doesn't know the parameters of the sensor, or doesn't know how it operates. Will they be able to pick out the same ills with that sensor? I don't think so.
Right. Well, so I think this is the question that they were intending to drive at in the NASA report is how do we unify our scientific approach to this across the multiple teams who, as you said, sometimes tend to work in silos.
Right.
Do you see some progress being made on that, or like is the fact that you're communicating with all these teams helping with that? Like you sort of seem like the glue of this sensor operation.
I would say that we're trying to work
on our end. We're communicating on our end, but like I said, if they're all receptive to it, I wouldn't say they're all receptive to it.
No.
We have had some issues with.
We've had a mixed bag of responses. There's some people that want to work with us, and some people that don't. But that's across the board. That's across the board.
Sure.
In the walls of academia, that may be more of an issue. We've seen that even people that we've had relationships with that have distanced themselves from us because of our reports that, we're not an academic institution, but look, we weren't trying to work with people. We're trying to, our results they're open and available. Take a look at them. Let's, work with us.
Right. But the quality of science is no less, is a high
we
standard, no
stick,
less in quality and high
right. We
standards.
stick to the scientific method,
and we just got to make sure that point gets across. I mean, to everybody.
Right.
That's what I mean by
that's across the board.
Let's collaborate.
Whether you're a PhD or you're a Bachelor of Science or whatnot, it's that communication, that standard has to be unified with everybody.
Is there a general cultural difference between academic science and the engineering world?
Yeah, I think there are, and I think that boundary has to be crossed.
Yeah. That's been a little bit of an issue. It's been a little bit of an issue. Like I said, we do.
This is the kind of issue we've been having with the Galileo project. Is we kind of banging heads on that front, and I mean, some of the heads of the Galileo project actually had distanced themselves from our research, which I don't know. I think that's kind of problematic. I think it's kind of foolish. And you can see it, I think it was on UFO Twitter, they had offered a statement on that. They're taking a neutral approach, but they don't sanction.
They don't sanction our work.
Which it's to us it's problematic.
Yeah, I mean,
that's frustrating. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we've been an open book with them, and we've had meetings where we shared this information with their team. And
then maybe more of a question of leadership, right?
Yeah. Some of their team actually is very enthusiastic. They want to work with us.
We've had members of their team come. We've had three scientists from Galileo Project came out 2 full nights with us, and observe what we're doing, and also run some of their equipment.
Right, side by side.
I don't think it translated over to the leadership end of Galileo.
We were speaking offline a little bit before, and you mentioned you thought they might have hit a bit of a wall with regard to funding. What is that like from your perspective within the broader scientific community, and what is the funding journey looking like for you guys in your next step?
It's I think
it's a struggle for everybody.
It's a struggle for everybody. And that's the thing. That's also when I say collaboration. It's if funding is so difficult to get, we should pull our resources together. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, we wanted to work with certain institutions, and we believe, look, the funding that we've gotten, some funding, and that funding was primarily used for instrumentation, to keep this thing going. It's it can be done. I say we can do it we've done it at a fraction of the cost. But it's devoted to the best possible equipment we can get for that funding, and it should be dedicated for that. It shouldn't be moved across the table to other avenues and so forth.
I think the bigger the organization, you got probably more bureaucratic. You get some bureaucracy, it's kind of lost in the bureaucracy. I guess.
I mean, it certainly can be done. I mean, especially what we're doing. I mean, we're talking under $1 million, to do a complete operation, the research on the water, USOs, and have, some of the finest equipment on that craft, on that vessel.
And that's something we know well,
and that's, but it's a matter of how much you want to invest in the instrumentation. It's like, you can't get a third-rate sensor and expect it to drive results. It's not.
Sure. And you're looking for probably a team project, and there's probably some time involved. Like maybe you'd like to do this for a year. Is that about right?
Yeah, right.
And to focus on 100%.
Yeah, and you really need to focus on that. It's
right now we do it part time. Like I said, it'd be nice to be able to focus on full time and 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I got a little bit more free time simply because
John's retired. I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, I have other problems, but keep me up at night, and it's great. It's the perfect thing
his
for insomnia.
His insomnia works because he can go all night long.
Yeah. Some of that cut out a little bit. You said you have other problems that keep you up at night.
Yeah, and the neurological issues. I'm an insomniac now, so I don't sleep.
Yes, I said so. His insomnia works.
So
it keeps going all night.
I sleep when I can, but no, I can be up all night if I need to. It's like so that's not an issue.
Well, that's cool. So if there are billionaires listening, like Yuri Milner, give these guys a call because they're ready to go out and find some exciting science with it. I've just a few more questions. One is, if somebody was building like a bare bones rig, what would you recommend as like the first off the shelf stuff to reach for?
Well, yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd look for is an NV camera, number one. 'Cause these
MD?
things, a night vision NV
Oh,
camera.
an NV. Okay,
Yep.
cool.
Definitely look for night vision camera. There's cheap cameras that actually work really good. You know, they are available. But they're generally under $1,000. You know, for
Yeah, and you can look at the stats of each camera,
Right.
the quality of the
Yeah,
stats.
you know, and of course, you know, some of the more common data, of course, is magnetometer, RF, electrical fields.
Yeah, basically you want to cover as much as the electromagnetic
Right.
spectrum as you can.
And here's a poor man's approach to that. You know, so if somebody has a cell phone, an Android or something like that, there's a million sensors in those cell phones. They all work really well. It has a magnetometer, it has a G-force sensor, it has an accelerometer, it has a camera. You know, that cell phone can be one of the pieces of equipment you use to go out there and record this stuff, and it will record it. You know, it's got a three-axis magnetometer, you know, accelerometer, and a proximity meter. It's got a luminous meter. You know, it'll measure lux. You know, these cell phones, they all have it.
Are there any apps that can help people use those sensors?
Yeah, you would download the apps for those particular functions.
Yeah, and there's the science toolkit. There's actually an application that was developed from a scientist in Russia that, you know, that it's a Geiger counter, and basically you put a piece of black electrical tape over one of the camera lenses, and it goes through a calibration process, and it does work as a pretty good Geiger counter.
Wow.
You know, so, you know, I mean, these things, I mean, it's just a cheap way of doing it, and it's,
Sure.
you know, and it'll give you results. I mean,
Would you recommend any particular app? Like, is there something called just magnetometer or whatever, or like any apps that people could use on their phone that would make their hunting
let me say
better?
the ones in particular, there's quite a few you know, if you're looking for magnetometers, quite a few of those.
Well, whatever would be the most useful, I guess, is what I should ask you for.
Yeah, it would
like,
be
if somebody was going to download just one or two apps.
No, there's a toolbox. It's called the physics toolbox, and the physics toolbox has all of those sensors, and you can literally turn on multiple sensors at the same time and record that data. You know, like if you have the accelerometer, you definitely want to leave it on a flat surface and just leave it alone. And it's the same thing with the magnetometer, and just let it record. There's camera apps that work really well. There's you know, some of them do have motion and movement sensors and that sort of thing. There's, like I said, the Geiger counter app as well. That there's one that I know of that works. I don't know about the others. I'm not quite sure if they really work that well. But there's one in particular, and it's made by a Russian applications guy, and that works really well as a Geiger counter. I mean, I've tested it myself when I was still working at the laboratory. I put it into an X-ray machine and the whole camera, and it did yield some pretty good results.
And did you guys find Geiger counters useful in your own field study, or do you?
Yes, we utilize several Geiger counters.
The interesting thing about the Geiger counters is that you have to look for instantaneous changes. Some of the Geiger counters, they do counts per minute, and they do averaging. And the counts per minute might be a little bit too long. If it's a brief encounter, you want to look for those instantaneous changes, like counts per second, for instance. I mean, you want to be able to record that instantaneous, you know, change in radioactive material, you know, radioactive activity. You know, like I said, you know, we have a ton of survey meters and so forth, you know, that we use, and some of them are quite expensive. But they average over time, you know, but you want to look at that, you know, that particular, you know, instantaneous change. There's some newly developed Geiger counter type devices that I think it was developed by people from MIT. That's being used out there, used for a particular type of radiation, an element, muons detector, muon counter. You know, I don't know. I mean, I would be just looking for any kind of, ionization radiation at all, that any kind of change in that, a lot of that stuff can be produced by CME events and so forth. And
so far, the most of the radioactive peaks we have gotten that were higher than normal were typically solar flare events or CME events.
Yeah.
What's a CME?
It's a coronal mass ejection. It's a massive solar flare from the sun.
Yeah, we had a lot. We had quite a few of them over the last,
we've had those.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so two more questions on the more significant end. One is, what would you guys like to do in the next couple years? Not just in terms of the sensors you'd like to deploy and the project you'd like to create, but what would you like to see? What would you like to get in terms of data collection? What is your goal in terms of getting out in the field and finding something now? Is it just sort of as simple as more data, more recordings, or are you looking for something kind of specific?
Disclosure.
Yeah, more data. Well, more data to iron the properties down of what these objects are, and of course disclosure.
Yeah,
if that ever occurs.
Well, disclosure will help get the right people involved, and also there's a cautionary tale too, because there are researchers out there like ourselves that don't know what they're exposed to. You're flashing these objects with an infrared illuminator, emitter, or a light. We don't know what the effects are. We don't know what they're all about. We don't know what their purpose is to be out there and so forth. If the government knows, they should share some of the information for safety. I mean, that's important.
Well, there's a safety.
A friend of ours is actively involved in that. Keith Taylor. And he's the undersheriff of Suffolk County right now, but he's also involved in UAP medical. He was involved in, but he's also emergency management.
He's interested in first responder protocols if they come up.
Exactly. You definitely want to inform the first responders.
Come across this phenomenon.
They need to be aware. They need to have the right equipment. They need to know what they're getting themselves, involved in and into, and that's important. That's really important.
Interesting.
And especially the work that Keith was
flight safety too. The same with Ryan Graves.
Flight
ASAs involved.
Right.
And we've had Ryan Graves out with us with his team.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a major thing too, is flight safety of flight issues.
Right.
Besides first responders and public safety.
And we appreciate the people like Kevin Knuth. I mean, he's getting the word out. He's a good scientist. He's a great scientist.
Busy writing a scientific paper.
Yeah, and he's a good resource.
Yeah, he seems really interesting. I'd love to talk to him, and I would love to talk to Keith Taylor and Ryan Graves. I noticed that I think the U.S. Police Chiefs organization sent out a
yes, that's something that
Keith and also Tim Gallaudet, the admiral.
He's a key component of looking at USOs and that kind of thing. What's the connection between these objects on water?
Yeah, there's key people that we're involved with. Because Chris Mellon, former Secretary of Defense, and Lou Elizondo and that sort of thing. So these are all key people in this. That's driving this thing home hopefully toward disclosure.
I feel like Chris Mellon might be able to help you find some money too. He knows one or two things about that.
We'll be reaching out to him again.
You hear that, Chris?
Fingers crossed. Okay, so last question, big fun one. Say we get a bunch of these sensor arrays up around the world, and say you guys come back with some really cool data from your ocean voyages, and we reach a point where we've got really reliable video and data from multiple sensors about these things, and it's sort of a publicly acknowledged fact. We've got sort of a form factor idea. We understand what they look like-ish and what they're doing. What next? Do you think we should try to talk to them in that close encounter scene where they play the music and flash the lights. Do you think it would make sense to take a next step of doing some kind of public outreach, and what would you want that to look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially if they've been here, we've been living amongst them for quite a while. If that's the case, we need to know,
especially with sharing
other species.
Yeah, if we're sharing the earth with something else, we definitely need
it's your neighbor.
We definitely need to cross that bridge in communication.
Yeah, it's got to be able to communicate, and it can't come from one entity, government entity, and speaking for the whole world, speaking for the people.
Exactly.
I mean, you don't want somebody, you don't want certain individuals speaking for the whole world, and on our behalf. That it needs to be disclosed. It really does. And it's, communication is definitely, is necessary. We have to, reach out to them. We know nothing about what they represent or what they're all about. And, we got to maybe, not be so fearful and open ourselves up to that, and I think for the most part, people will, they would accept it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they already do. I think we're at a point now where most people accept it. It's look in the sky and said, "Oh yeah, let's a UFO." It's look, let's go to the next step. It's something that we know very little about, and we need to understand. We need to understand what it is.
And as far as that direct communication with let's say there's a non-human intelligence, I don't know exactly what that would look like. I mean, yeah, we could do what we do. We could signal them in various ways, come up with different ways to do that. But I guess there's got to be a consensus on what that would look like,
right?
Or what it should look like, maybe.
Right. And all we can go by is, certain documented abduction cases and that sort of thing. That might, give some leeway, some example of what they're all about, what how they approach human beings. I mean, in particular, with of course, we're familiar with the Betty and Barney Hill case, back in 1961, which is pretty profound abduction. But there's been others, and maybe we should listen to the message, and
review that a little deeper.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's so much us trying to find a way to communicate with them. I think they're already aware of it. I think it's just a matter of them communicating with, if they're a more advanced species, they'll find a way to communicate with us. We just got to be open to it.
It's a very interesting question. What we might do to entice them to go on Colbert or something? Just give us the dirt. Just tell us what's going on would be great.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you that it does not seem ideal to have one, say, 3-letter agency speaking for the entirety of humanity. If we are attempting to communicate, it'd be a bummer if it was just the CIA.
Oh yeah, it's all trouble.
Yeah, and there's some agencies that are consciously trying to reach out, work with people. I mean, I just give a shout out to the, in our case, the FBI, that we are trying to work with and so forth. And they've been, very open. I'll leave it at that,
Did they reach out to you or you called them?
They reached out to us, but, we're glad, we're happy to collaborate with them, they've been,
well, we need more government entities taking an interest in this in a positive way.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
And working with the public,
and
citizen scientists, or whatever you want.
Definitely want to figure this out.
Yeah. I mean, and they are open to it. It's we're happy that they are.
That's really great, you guys. I want to say thank you so much as somebody who's cheering from the sidelines and has none of the scientific and technological information wherewithal that you have. I'm so grateful that you're out there doing this hard work. I think it's really cool. And I'm a big fan from the sidelines. So keep
and we appreciate
Tigers.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to finish with wherever people would like, where would you like to have people follow you online? Do you have any sort of like outlets where you like people to reach out, or do you prefer people not reach out to you? That's fine.
Well, you can reach out.
Yeah,
we actually have a social networking site. It's on Facebook. It's called the Nightcrawler Eye in the Sky. It's like
Great.
it's kind of a little small org that people can share ideas,
share ideas
and chat,
and
you know,
reports
openly
and
chat,
openly chat. There's also link.
ask questions.
You know, we're available on LinkedIn if they want to look us up.
Yeah,
at
we're on
LinkedIn,
LinkedIn,
that sort of
so, yeah.
thing. So you know, we'll respond to any
Yeah.
messages.
You know, we definitely got to set up a regular website. I think.
Yeah, that's next.
You know, something a little substantial.
Yeah, one of these days. I saw you have a YouTube channel, but you maybe haven't poked around with it in a while. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. That was basically that was beginnings. That was establishing equipment and protocols and stuff. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's right. Some of my teaching experiences too.
Oh, nice. Well, I bet if you get bored enough in the middle of the night and you want to make more YouTube videos, people would watch them.
There's something to do.
I know how it goes with putting something creative down and then coming back to it much later. And the internet's forgiving. We all just want to hear what you think.
Sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you guys so much for sharing your time with me. I really appreciate the chat.
And thank you.
Have a great night.
Yes,
You too. Enjoy your night.
Yeah, enjoy your night. All right, bye now.
And that's the show. Thank you for watching or listening. Support us for $1 a month at patreon.com/WTUFO. Patreon.com/WTUFO. Support us for $1 a month. Thank you very much.